A very warm welcome to everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are. A very warm welcome, and thanks for joining us to this webinar, Health Over Profits: How Can We Regulate Tobacco, Alcohol, and Food Industries? My name is Nicole Stoff, and I'm a research associate at the Center for Planetary Health Policy, and we are part of the German Climate and Health Alliance. I have the pleasure of moderating this webinar, and I have exciting speakers with me, which I will introduce to you in a second. Before we start into the webinar, I'd like to point out that we are in a very lucky position to have interpreters with us today. So if you are German speaking and if you would like to have translation from English to German, please select the globe icon in the bottom of your screen and you can select the German channel. Wenn Sie das Webinar auf Deutsch verfolgen wollen, dann können Sie gerne den Globus auswählen und dort den Kanal Deutsch auswählen. Dann werden Sie auch alle Präsentationen übersetzt bekommen. So at this point already, a big thank you to our interpreters, Gisela Tansch and Dorit Torrent. And thank you so much for your facilitation today. It's very much appreciated. So this webinar is organized by Foodjustice and Unfairtobacco. Both projects are run by the Berlin Working Group for Environment and Development, Blue 21. It's also supported by Movendi International, and it is funded by Engagement Global with funds from the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, by the State Office for Development and Cooperation of the Berlin Senate, and the Evangelical Church Development Service, Brot für die Welt, Bread for the World, and the Foundation Oskar Heleneheim. Thank you so much for your support in making this webinar possible. Some brief information on housekeeping and technical information. You can see us, but we cannot see you. This is set up as a webinar, so whenever you have technical questions, please raise them in the chat. And if you have questions regarding the presentations and also during the discussion, please raise your questions in the Q&A section. This webinar will be recorded and it will also be made available after the webinar on the YouTube channel. And you will be provided the presentation slides and the recording also after the webinar. Today, we will discuss, among other things, how does legislation actually work and which improvements have been made in recent years, who are the key players of commercial determinants of health, and how have they managed to bring about change? Which obstacles have been encountered and which opportunities exist to achieve even more? And how can we support governments in better aligning their actions with principles of health over profit? So to give you a brief overview of this webinar, we will start with a short input on commercial determinants of health and some key takeaways from a think piece that was recently published by the Center for Planetary Health Policy. And then we will move on to a best practice from Mexico on the law on adequate and sustainable nutrition. We will then continue with contributions about regulation of tobacco products in Bangladesh, alcohol in Sweden, and trans fats in Nigeria. So this is a very exciting agenda ahead, and that's why we'll start right away with the first presentation. And for that, I'd like to introduce my colleague Miriam Meschede. She has a master's degree in prevention and health promotion and works as a research associate at the Center for Planetary Health Policy. She focuses on occupational and municipal heat health protection, as well as healthy and sustainable nutrition. We will now hear from her from the key takeaways of the think piece, and I'm very happy that you're here. Miriam, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I will start sharing my screen. And now you should see it. Can you see it?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so one last thing I have to do. Okay, so thank you very much for your introduction. In my short presentation, I would like to start with some definitions, then move on to the impact of food, alcohol, and tobacco on human and planetary health, then present 6 corporate strategies that influence human and planetary health, and end with recommendations to limit commercial influences. So let's start with some definitions. What is planetary health? The concept of planetary health describes the interconnections between human health and the stability of Earth systems as a whole. So it encompasses a broad and transdisciplinary understanding of the influences on and the conditions for human health. So it takes into account the fact that health is a very complex construct that is influenced strongly by the systems in which we live. And systems is the key word when talking about commercial determinants because they create some of the systems that influence our health. Gilmore et al. Describe commercial determinants as systems, practices, and pathways through which commercial actors drive health and equity. Commercial determinants on planetary health refer to corporate influences that drive not only non-communicable diseases and health inequities, but also contribute to climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and resource depletion. So climate change and environmental damage in turn also harm our health and should therefore be taken into account. Related costs, for example, socially for the environment or our health, are commonly externalized, while economic and political power is concentrated. This model illustrates how commercial and political forces shape health outcomes from the broadest systemic level down to the individual. At the outer level, the commercial and policy context, we have including regulation, trade, and taxes, and they set the conditions for our everyday life. These factors shape our everyday environment, such as housing, food systems, media, and workplaces. Closer to the individual, we have health impacts that are determined by access to resources, exposure, and power. And together, these interconnected layers show us how broader systems influence individual health and drive inequalities. In other words, the choices people make are not purely personal. They are shaped at every level by commercial interests and political decisions. So let's take a look at the impact of food, alcohol, and tobacco on planetary health. In Germany, we have a lot of unused potential for prevention. Germany spends more on healthcare than any other European country, but the life expectancy ranks in the lower middle tier. The key drivers for mortality and disease burden are cardiovascular diseases, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and respiratory illness. A large share of these diseases are linked to behavioral risk factors like smoking, alcohol consumption, and a poor diet. These preventable diseases cause a lot of individual suffering, but also direct and indirect health costs, such as productivity loss, sick leave, or early retirement. So we see we have a lot of unused potential for prevention. Let's dive further into the food sector. In Germany, more than half of the population is overweight or obese, and an unhealthy diet is one of the leading risk factors for premature death from NCDs globally. The most significant risk factor in this field is a high consumption of red and processed meat. From the environmental perspective, agri-food systems account for nearly 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, contributing significantly to climate change. In Germany, animal agriculture was responsible for around 47% of agricultural GHG emissions in 2024. In addition, monocultures, intensive animal farming, and the intensive use of chemical inputs contribute to the degradation of ecosystems through soil erosion, water contamination, and biodiversity loss. Smoking remains one of the leading preventable risk factors for disease and premature death. Tobacco production, consumption, and waste affect ecosystems, deplete natural resources at every stage of the product life cycle, for example, deforestation and biodiversity loss in low and middle income countries where most of the production occurs. The tobacco supply chain contributes substantially to GHGs, with annual emissions estimated in the tens of millions of tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The life cycle of tobacco also creates extensive toxic waste, and cigarette butts are among the most frequently littered items worldwide, leaching harmful chemicals into soils and waterways. Production and waste of novel tobacco and nicotine products create new environmental burdens. These products require materials for their manufacture, which can then also release toxic waste when they are disposed of. In 2021, approximately 47,000 deaths in Germany were related to high alcohol consumption. After tobacco use, alcohol consumption is the leading risk factor for cancer in the European Union. In 2020, 4.5 of all new cancer cases in Europe were related to alcohol consumption. And alcohol consumption is both water and energy intensive and contributing to GHG emissions. When we think back to the model of the commercial determinants of health, we see how important the conditions in which we live are for our health. So let's take a look at strategies that corporations or industry associations use to maximize their profits and that influence human and planetary health. First of all, we have political lobbying. That means that corporations spend heavily on lobbying, they make campaign donations, and they use their financial power in general to shape political decisions in their favor. One example is that tobacco companies use lobbying consultancies and public affairs firms to influence the European Commission or members of the European Parliament. For instance, to influence the Tobacco Taxation Directive. The second strategy is marketing and advertising. Corporations use greenwashing, micro-targeted ads, and responsibility shifting to distract from the harm their products cause to health and to the environment. One example is that the Danish Crown company launched a climate-controlled pork campaign that was ruled to be misleading by Denmark's High Court in 2024. Then we have corporate philanthropy. Corporations sponsor university, museums, sports, clubs, and cultural events to build a positive public image. One example is that Carlsberg, so a brewery, signed a sponsorship deal in 2025 to become a major sponsor for football games. The fourth strategy is market segmentation. That means that corporations tailor their campaigns to specific demographics or regions to make their marketing as effective as possible. An example is that e-cigarettes with sweet flavors and bright colors are marketed to appeal to younger demographics. Strategic partnership means that corporations form alliances with governments, NGOs, or academic institutions to shape narratives and slow down regulation or transition. One example is that the meat and dairy industries fund nutrition research that downplays the importance of plant-based diets. And we have the suppression of alternatives. And that means that corporations block regulation, spread uncertainty, and frame their products as indispensable to prevent a shift to a healthier and more sustainable alternatives. One example is that Italy banned the production and sale of cultured meat in 2023. So what can we do about it? We recommend to introduce conflict of interest safeguards and lobbying transparency, to phase out subsidies and tax exemptions for harmful industries, to align taxes and pricing with health and sustainability goals, to ban or strictly regulate harmful marketing and greenwashing, to restrict revolving door appointments with harmonized cooling off periods, and to mandate standardized health and environmental labeling. And if you want to read into what I just talked about some more, I recommend you this article that Nicole already mentioned that was published by the CPHP this year and that you can find under this link.
Veröffentlichen. Sie finden es auf der Website. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, Miriam. Der Link.
So if you want to have a look at the paper and some of the insights and some more details, please have a look. And I think, yeah, thank you so much, Miriam, for setting the scene. I think this provides a very good starting point for for the other inputs, but also the discussion and also linking the commercial determinants of health, but to planetary health, and not only the direct health impacts, but also the impacts on the environment and the degradation, and also the social impact. So I think this provides very good food for thought already, and I think some of the common strategies that you pointed out from the corporate sector we will probably hear about more during the examples from our inputs today and the countries that we will have a closer look at. So yes, thank you so much for sharing. And if there are any questions, clarification questions, please ask them in the chat. Miriam will stay with us until about 11 o'clock, and then she has to go to another commitment. So if you have any questions for clarification, please raise them in the chat. And if I don't see any at this point, then I'd like to continue and introduce to you Andrea Arango Angarita. Andrea is a researcher at the Center for Evaluation and Survey Research at the Mexican National Institute of Public Health, and she has expertise in population nutrition and food systems. Her work focuses on the analysis of national dietary data, including the Mexican National Health and Nutrition Survey, and the evaluation of dietary patterns to assess the health, environmental and economic dimensions of diets. She has contributed to scientific publications in the field and has received national and international awards for her research on healthy and sustainable diets. Due to the time difference to Mexico, Andrea has kindly recorded her presentation, and we will now have a chance to listen to her presentation. So Sonia, if you could share the recording, that would be lovely.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be part of the discussion. My name is Andrea Arango from the National Institute of Public Health in Mexico, and today I will talk about the Mexican law on adequate and sustainable nutrition, focusing on one central question: how can we move from legal recognition to real implementation? And I want to mention that this presentation is free of conflict of interest. Let me start by explaining why this law matters in the Mexican context. This slide introduces the general law on adequate and sustainable food in Mexico. And as you can see on the left, the law was officially published in the Diario Oficial de la Federación on April 17 in 2024. This is important because it gives legal force to the right to adequate food in Mexico. And on the right, we can see the public communication around the approval of the law. And the central idea is that the Mexican population should have access to nutritious, sufficient, and quality food every day. This timeline shows that the law was the result of a long process and not an isolated decision. It begins with the International Human Rights Framework on the right to food, followed by the Mexican constitutional recognition of the right to nutritious, sufficient, and quality food in 2011. And you can see that after several years of legislative work, the law was approved by Congress and published in April 2024. And as you can see here, the law represents a shift from isolated nutrition actions to a broader rights-based food policy framework. This is important because adequate nutrition is not only the result of individual choices, as you know. People's diets are shaped by food environments, by physical and economic access to food, by production and supply systems, cultural relevance, sustainability, and public governance. So, the central message is that the law provides a legal basis to move from individual responsibility to state responsibility. On the other hand, law regulates the right to adequate food in Mexico and establishes principles, rights, obligations, and coordination mechanisms between authorities and society. Its purpose is broad. It seeks to promote and protect and respect and guarantee the right to adequate food, but it also prioritizes health, the environment, water, and the best interests of children and the most vulnerable population. This is important because it places food policy within a wider human rights and public health framework. So the law also aims to strengthen food self-sufficiency, food sovereignty, and food security while promoting sustainable food environments and social participation. The main idea is that the law does not only tell people what to eat, it defines what the state should to do to make adequate, healthy, and sustainable food possible. The law can be summarized in three major goals. First, it guarantees the right to adequate food, nutrition, safe, sufficient, and culturally appropriate food without discrimination. This is very important. And the second, it seeks to transform food system by promoting fair distribution, local production, food sovereignty, and reduction of food loss and waste. And the third goal is related with the creates the governance needed for implementation, that is the coordination between levels of government, social participation, transparency, accountability, and protection from conflicts of interest. In short, the law connects rights, sustainability, and governance, and you can see in this slide. But what does an adequate and sustainable nutrition mean? And adequate nutrition is not defined only as having enough food. You know that it refers to food that is nutrition sufficient, of good quality, culturally appropriate, and able to support integral development, optimal nutrition, and dignified life. This is important because it expands the discussion beyond calories or individual choices. It includes the broader conditions that allow people to eat well. And on the right side, we can see the role of the state. The state is required to promote, respect, and protect the right to adequate food. This includes ensuring physical and economic access, prioritizing children, supporting priority groups, addressing poverty and food insecurity, and preventing discrimination or unjustified conditioning of food supply. So the key point is that adequate and sustainable nutrition is both a personal need and a public responsibility. In this slide, I will show you how the law tries to translate rights into concrete policy mechanisms. On the left, you can see that the law includes several operational tools, such as regional normative, food baskets, community kitchens, public procurement for small and medium-scale producers, support for local food production, reduction of food loss and waste, strategic food reserves, and emergency food response protocols. That is a point very interesting in this law. And on the right, I want to highlight one of the most important mechanisms, that is the SINSAMAC, the National Intersectoral System for Health, Food, Environment, and Competitiveness. This system was designed to coordinate national food policy, like federal, state, and municipal governments, include citizens and food committees, promote policy coherence, monitor implementation, and support an objective evaluation of the food system. So the main point here is that the law is not only declarative, it already provides mechanisms to move from rights to implementation, and the challenge is making these mechanisms actually work. One of the most important points of the presentation. As you can see in the slide, civil society organizations, academic groups, peasant organizations, and activists have taken a clear position. Mexico has a strong law, but 2 years after its publication, it still lacks this regulation. This matters because without the regulation, the law cannot be fully translated into concrete actions. And according to these organizations, this delayed the implementation of a comprehensive national food policy. It slows the activation of SINSAMAC and limits the country's ability to respond to food insecurity, malnutrition, obesity, and chronic disease. And it also weakens Mexico's capacity to fulfill its international commitments related with right to food. No? So the key message here is that the absence of regulation is not simply an administrative delay. This is a critical implementation gap. After discussing the law and its implementation gap, this slide gives a quick snapshot of the other regulatory tools in Mexico. As you can see, Mexico has different levels of regulation across 3 product areas: ultra-processed foods and sugar-sweetened beverage, tobacco, and alcohol. For ultra-processed foods and sugary drinks, Mexico has fiscal measures and also the front of package warning labels and restrictions in school environments. And I will show you later, but these tools are directly connected to the goals of the food law because they address information, availability, and healthy food environments too. For tobacco, the regulatory framework is stronger. It includes taxes, a tobacco control law, stronger limits on promotion and advertising, regulated sales, and health warnings on package. But in the case of alcohol, in contrast, it remains more fragmented. It is taxed according to alcohol content and sale to minor is prohibited, but marketing and availability controls are still less comprehensive than in tobacco. So the main message in this slide is that Mexico has several regulatory instruments, but they are not equally strong across products. The opportunity is to connect them through a more coherent public health and a food policy framework. This slide introduces one of Mexico's most important fiscal policies for healthier food environments, that is the taxes on sugar-sweetened beverage and non-essential energy-dense foods. As you can see on the left, Mexico introduced a specific excise tax of 1 peso per liter on sugar-sweetened beverage, and at the time this represents approximately a 10% increase in price and it applied to non-alcoholic beverage with added sugar. And on the right, we can see the tax on non-essential energy-dense foods that this was designed as an 8% ad valorem tax applied to a list of products with high energy density, specifically those with 275 kilocalories or more per 100 grams. The key point is that Mexico used fiscal policy not only to raise revenue but also to discourage the purchases of products associated with poor diet quality and chronic disease risk. Mexico introduced the soda tax in response to a high burden of obesity and diabetes, as you can see in this infographic. The tax was designed not only to raise revenue but also to reduce the purchases of sugary drinks. Evidence show a decrease in purchases after implementation, and some modeling studies projected potential benefits for obesity and diabetes prevention. Its relevance is also about equity because larger benefits were expected among young adults and lower income groups. So the main lesson is that price policies can work, but their impact depends on the design, implementation, and also, that is very important, the industry response. In these tables, I summarize the main evidence from Mexico's soda tax. The evidence shows three important points. First, purchases of sugary drinks decrease, while water purchases increase, especially in lower socioeconomic households. And in the second study, in the modeling studies, they suggest a potential long-term benefits, including reduction in obesity and diabetes cases, as I mentioned previously. And a third, that is a recent study, shows that the effect was still observed 4 years after implementation, although the impact varied by store type. So it's simple. The tax works, but its impact depends on the design, monitoring, and the response of the industry, as I told you before, and also of the response of the retailers. And this is the other policy, that is the front of package warning labels, that are a very key policy tool in Mexico. They refer to NOM in 051 introduced clear black warning labels for products that exceed limits for calories, sugar, sodium, saturated fats, or trans fats. It also includes warning legends for products with sweeteners or caffeine, especially to protect children. And the value of this policy is that it makes nutrition information easier to understand and the point of purchase. And it helps consumers identify products with excess critical nutrients quickly without needing to interpret complex nutrition tables. This slide explains how the warning labels are synced. The Mexican nutrient profile use a specific threshold for calories, sugars, saturated fat, trans fat, and sodium. And if a product exceeds these limits, it must display the corresponding warning label. It also includes warning legends or labels for products that contain not calories, sweeteners, or caffeine, and especially because they are not recommended for children. The main point is that this system does not depend on marketing claims. It uses defined nutrient criteria to identify products with excess critical nutrients. In this another study, that is the policy study in 2017, shows that the warning labels were easier to understand than other labeling systems. For Mexican participants, understanding of warning level was particularly high, and this supported the use of simple, visible, and visible warnings instead of complex nutritional information. The key point is that warning labels help translate technical nutrition criteria into information that people can use quickly. And you can see in this graph the high understanding of this strategy, specifically for the labels in Mexico. This is another study that adds an important point. Warning labels can also encourage reformulation, and before the policy, most products had at least one warning label. And after implementation, there was a significant reduction in products carrying warning labels across food and beverage groups. The largest changes were observed for sodium and saturated fat in some product categories. And there was also some anticipatory reformulation, but the largest changes occurred after implementation. So the key message is that labeling is not only an information policy, it can also push companies to change products formulations. On the other hand, the dietary guidelines are another important tool because they translate the idea of healthy and sustainable diets into practical recommendations. They promote diets based on vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and traditional food, especially those that are seasonal and locally produced. They also reinforce a key message that connects with the labeling policy: avoid products with warning labels. So while the law provides the legal framework, the dietary guidelines help translate that framework into everyday food choices, education, and public policy that is also related with this law. This study showed that the Mexican dietary guidelines are not only recommendations, they also have measurable potential benefits. The evidence suggests that the healthier and more sustainable diets in Mexico could reduce environmental impacts, improve nutritional adequacy, and have lower diet costs compared with current diets. And also a modeling study suggests potential health benefits, including reductions in mortality from cardiometabolic disease and colorectal cancer. So the key message is that dietary guidelines can support public health, sustainability, and affordability at the same time. This is the strategy Like Healthy, Like Happy that shows how Mexico is trying to bring healthy food policies into schools. The focus is improving the well-being of school-age children by promoting healthy habits in everyday school life. And it includes three main components. First, regulating the sale of ultra-processed and low nutritional value products in schools. Also developing a healthy living curriculum and using community-based action such as health groups and health fairs for this goal. Tobacco is a useful comparison because Mexico has a more consolidated regulatory framework in this area. The general law for tobacco control regulates labeling, advertising, promotion, sponsorship, sale, and use, and includes measures to protect people from tobacco smoke and emissions. Recent measures have strengthened advertising restriction, standardized labeling, and smoke-free and emission-free spaces. The main lesson is that regulating harmful products requires more than taxes. It also needs warnings, enforcement, advertising, restrictions, and protection for industry influence. It's a different case. Compared with tobacco, regulation is still more fragmented. Alcohol consumption is linked to more than 200 diseases and injuries, as well as violence, road traffic injuries, and economic losses. In Mexico, excessive alcohol consumption has increased, especially among young people and low-income populations. The evidence shows that higher taxes can reduce consumption and increase revenue, but taxes alone are not enough. They need to be combined with restrictions on availability, advertising controls, vendor training, warning labels, and stronger enforcement. The key point is that alcohol remains an important policy gap in the health over profits agenda. And this slide shows the 2026 economic package changes health related with taxation in Mexico. The stronger increases are for sugar sweetened beverage and manufactured tobacco. The tax on sugary drinks almost doubles, and the ad valorem tax on manufactured tobacco increases from 160 to 200%. But alcohol is an important contrast. Its tax rate remains unchanged between 26.5 and 53% depending on alcohol content. So the main message is that Mexico is strengthening some health taxes, but not all. This creates progress, but also shows important policy gaps. And finally, this example shows how the beverage industry responded, for example, to the IEPS reform. The industry report dialogue with authorities and Congress, a reduced tax for non-calorie beverage, voluntary reformulation commitments, and commercial strategies to promote low or no-calorie products. So from a public health perspective, the concern is not only reformulation, it's also how industry can shape the policy narrative and maintain market presence. The key result of the measure is that health taxes need transparency, independent monitoring, and clear safeguards against conflict of interest. To conclude, Mexico's experience shows that legal recognition is necessary but not sufficient. The country now has a strong legal framework for adequate and sustainable nutrition, but to turn this right into real change, several conditions are still needed. The regulation of the law, full activation of SINSAMAC, clear institutional responsibilities, public financing, local implementation capacity, independent monitoring, transparency, and safeguard against conflicts of interest are needed. The broader lesson is that healthy and sustainable diets cannot depend only on individual choices. They require governance, resource, accountability, and protection for commercial determinants of health. So the final message is simple. Moving from rights to real change means creating the conditions so that everyone can enjoy healthy and sustainable diets. And thank you very much for your attention. These are my social media accounts and contact information. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. It's unfortunate that Andrea cannot be with us here today, but if she watches the recording at some point, a big thank you for all those valuable insights and into your best practice. I think it was a very rich presentation that already gives us some really good learnings. And I just want to highlight a few key aspects that I found very interesting and that also maybe come up in the following presentations as well. So I think the presentation nicely highlights, or the case from Mexico highlights that it's a stepwise process of legislation. It's not just one isolated decision that results in change and into a policy framework, but it's a stepwise process. And also that I found this very interesting because it's a common strategy by the corporate sector to divert decisions and responsibility to the individual. But the law recognizes that it's not only individual choice, but that the individual choices are influenced by the conditions and that the public sector is responsible for shaping those conditions, that individual choices can be healthy and that nutritious food can be accessed and it's affordable and socially appropriate. So yeah, shifting the responsibility from the individual to the state and to the broader conditions. I think it's very important that this is made clear. And another key message for me was that it's a comprehensive policy framework that's necessary, and there are different pathways and different mechanisms that are available at our hands. So it's the taxes, it's the labeling and the warnings, it's restrictions, it's availability. So there is a choice that's of instruments available, and they are effective if they're implemented together, and also not just for one product, but across different harmful products. And we could also see that the level of implementation is different for different products. So maybe it's already quite advanced for tobacco, but it's more fragmented for alcohol. And it's important that all those measures kind of support each other and implement it as a package. So, and what I also found very, very interesting and important is the monitoring and the provision of evidence that those instruments are actually working and having an effect on health, but also on the environment, that they're protective for both. And yes, since Andrea's not with us, I'd like to move on to the next presentation. And for that, I'd like to hand a warm welcome to Sushanta. Sushanta Kumar Singh is an investigative journalist with more than 16 years of experience across 5 major television networks in Bangladesh. He is the first Bangladeshi journalist to receive the WHO Southeast Asia Regional Director's Special Recognition Award for Excellence in Tobacco Control Journalism in 2025. He was also recognized by other international and national awards for his valuable contributions to tobacco control journalism. Sorry, there's one person who should mute himself, herself. There's some background noise, sorry. Maybe the person could be muted from the technical side. Thank you. So yes, back to Sushanta. He was also recognized by other international and national awards for his valuable contributions to tobacco control journalism. He currently serves as a planning editor at Ekator Television, the country's largest 24-hour news channel, where he focuses on international trade, climate change, public health, and financial corruption. Singa is also an active public health researcher focusing on tobacco industry interferences, financial irregularities, taxation policy, and child labor. So with all that experience, he's very well positioned to share his insights on the regulation of tobacco products in Bangladesh. Sushanta, it's very nice to have you with us, and we're very much looking forward to your insights from Bangladesh. Over to you.
Thank you, and welcome all of you. And obviously, thanks to organizers Foodjustice and Unfairtobacco. And there is a very well-known introduced reception for me. And my topic is the regulation of tobacco production in Bangladesh. As we know, Bangladesh is the 8th largest smoking tobacco product consumer country in the world, as well as we are the 8th to 10th little bit shift, the largest 10th tobacco leaf producer country. So in a small country like 170 million people, it's very important for us to regulate the tobacco products. So can we go to the second slide? This is the scenario of Bangladesh tobacco tax revenue. Almost every last year we got the 400. Second slide, please. We got the 410 billion tobacco revenue, but in the same time, our researchers say that the tobacco-related health burden and cost goes to 730 billion. So net loss is going on, and the death, almost 200,000 people are dying every year, but thousands of people are facing a difficult life for the secondhand smoking and other tobacco-related problem like non-communicable diseases. Can I go to the third slide? And as I told you, the revenue issue each and everywhere. This is the revenue that I told you, $410 billion. It is the tax system is the ad valorem systems. Why it is important? Because of the tobacco industry also getting a huge profit from this ad valorem system that we will discuss in the next slide. Can you go to the next slide? Out of this 410 billion, we got only 20 million, that is 20 crore taka, for the tobacco related prevention or any program that organized by our NTCC, National Tobacco Control Cell, a authority under the Ministry of the Health. If you see, this is the Bangla advertisement. Beside this, one man, he is talking with a cell phone at a shop. This is the ad, which is fully banned in our tobacco control law, but the industry is putting this tobacco price as the ad in the point of sale where the people are taking or purchasing their cigarette. And this is the misleading information all the tobacco industry are putting in the point of sale. So this is very gross violation of our tobacco control law. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the packaging system. In Bangladesh, we have 50% graphics health warning, but in our law, the provision is the upper side of the 50% of package. but the industry influenced our law minister and law secretary, and they put it in the lower portion, which is not very effectively. Besides this problem, here is the problem of no quit line in the information of package, no production date of cigarette, no QR code or the any verification system in our packaging system, no price per stick in display, and the manual stamp and bandroll system still in use. This is, if you see the last part of this for graphics and the gold leaf, there is a band's roll and text stamp, which is you cannot check is it fake or not. So we asked to the weak bandroll system is enabled to tax evasion for the company, and we have some evidence. And another issue is that the weakness of our health warnings. If you see the our another presentation by Mexican and the other presentation, there are some photographs which is included in graphics health warning, but compared to the Bangladesh, this is the very mild. This is not very effective, and we asked to the WHO and the Ministry of Health to change the graphics health warning photograph, which is more stronger than the before. And BD, which is the hand rolled cigarette, and the smokeless tobacco is a very non-compliance in our country, and tax rate is very low in two segment. But the user of BD and the smokeless tobacco is higher than the cigarette. Can we go to the next slide? So the Tobacco Control Act, it will now it's the tobacco control law, because the 2025 it was the act by our interim government. Now it passed by our current government. So it's both the Smoking and Tobacco Control Act 2026. The challenge is the fake letters and misinformation influence the policy member. If you heard, the issue of banning some e-cigarette was in the Tobacco Control Act in 2025. But when we see the tobacco control law and pass in the 10th of April this year, we saw the government lifting the bar of e-cigarette. So nowadays, e-cigarette, vaping, and nicotine pouch is a normal product like the any other tobacco product, which was banned in before. So the influence of industry is a very big threat for us. And court order, our highest court appellate division gave a verdict in 2026 that Bangladesh should reduce the tobacco leaf cultivation, as well as no new tobacco company can open their business. So government should take the responsibility to minimize the tobacco use and for the sake of public health. But this year we saw that the new tobacco company like the Philip Morris, they are set up a factory here for producing nicotine pouch. So this is the very alarming for our public health. And the conflict of interest concern the involvement of tobacco companies like the British American Tobacco. If you see the photographs, there are some red marks. We will see the what and why the red marks is there. And the smuggling narrative used by the tobacco industry, as I told you, the last decades, the revenue from the cigarette is increased multiple folds, but always cigarette company is creating a myth that if you increase the price and if you increase the tax, smuggling will be happen, and so government will lose their revenue. We shown that several times. The data is provided by National Board of Revenue that we amended our tobacco control law 3 times in the decades, and we have a strict tax policy, but revenue is increased. So smuggling is a myth of the tobacco industry that is the huge spread in our country. And also the hidden industry influence in the policymaker. As I told you, the policymaker are very close to industry people like the Ministry of the Health and Ministry of Finance and NBR also. This time, our Minister of Health, Ministry of Health, he told that we are allowing nicotine pouch and e-cigarette for set up our factory in Bangladesh because of our revenue shortage. We want to earn more revenue. That is why we are bringing the Philip Morris for set up a factory here for producing nicotine pouch, which is very alarming for us. And interference of implementation of the Tobacco Control Act. Why the important photograph I put here that with the red mark, that question will be answered in the letter. And the main argument for the public health advocates to as well as the disease and the premature deaths is Bangladesh that I told the 200,000 people are dying every year for tobacco related death, and protection for the non-smoker, especially child and women, and loopholes of advertisement and promotional activities that I told in our law, all sorts of promotional activities, advertisement is banned, but company is doing by violating the law, and ban the e-cigarette and nicotine pouch to protect the youth. As we said earlier, we have the demographic dividend because our youth people is much more bigger. So Philip Morris, BAT, JTI, they are also trying to get their consumer for this newly tobacco products like the e-cigarette, nicotine pouch, and the cigarette as well as. So it's a big threat. And the tobacco industry argument that they always try to push the policymaker, if you could increase the tax, illicit and smuggling will be increased, and their farmers and small cigarette seller will be lost their job. This is absolutely fake and not true. We can go to the next slide. As I told that, here is some of the designation I put here. And the first on the women with the green shari we call, she is the Jakia Sultana. She was the acting board member of British American Tobacco, as well as she is the secretary of Ministry of Industry. She has the role to protect the industry for the sake of people and to protect the people's health, but she is a board member of British American Tobacco. Beside her, a taller man in the red tie, he is the principal secretary of our ex-prime minister. So can you imagine our prime minister, ex-prime minister Sheikh Hasina told that, and she announced that the Bangladesh will be tobacco free by 2040. But her principal secretary is sitting on the board of British American Tobacco, which is British American Tobacco is the 70% tobacco cigarette market is holding. So they have a big power. And beside Mr. Tofazul Mia, ex-principal secretary, another female, she was the Ministry of Finance. She was a additional secretary. Besides him, another people who is the red mark, he was the ex-secretary of Ministry of Liberation War. He is now in the board of BAT last 10 years. And beside Mr. Masood Siddiqui, the red one, another people who is the mark is KM Ali Azam. Ali Azam was the secretary of Ministry of Labor. Can you imagine? There is a board of British American Tobacco, 11 people, out of 4 are the running secretary, Minister of Industry, principal secretary of the Prime Minister, and the Health Ministry of the Labor, as well as the Ministry of Finance. So this is the pressure, this is the strength of tobacco industry to influence the policy member, because our industry minister, industry secretary is the single secretary. She is operating the whole ministry. But in the British American Tobacco, when they are sitting in a board meeting, there are 3 or 4 secretaries from the government side. So how can you regulate the tobacco industry? So that is our big challenge. We have to remove the secretary from British American Tobacco. And after the issue of tobacco control law, which is amended and last April that was passed, next we have a big struggle period like 2025. Our smoking and tobacco control law was first, it was passed after the 2023, when the Bangladesh was the first signatory of FCTC. Then in 2005 we passed the law, and to 2013 we amended the law and stronger the issue of like the packaging and the smoking ban in the public places. This is, and the advertising ban. This came to the 2013 law amendment, and after that 2022 to 2025 there is an increase of advocacy for the tobacco control groups and the journalists like me and others to introduce the goal that I said earlier. The ex-Prime Minister set up a goal for tobacco-free Bangladesh by 2040. And after that, the current phase, the tobacco smoking and tobacco control amendment law 6 was passed in 10th this year. But there are some loopholes by hidden influence of the tobacco industry that we have to move forward. And the tobacco control groups, journalists, and civil society role, and we are conducting research and awareness and campaign as well as the news with the mobilized journalists around the country and the media and the public opinion to engage the policymaker and the parliamentarians and unearth the tobacco industry interference through the secretary that I mentioned, who are sitting in the BAT board. And these are also, there are 2 secretaries who are sitting in the BAT board. So this is a big threat and big challenge for us. And the next slide, please. Sanjay, next slide. So tobacco tax structure is the ad valorem system, as I said earlier. If you see that supplementary duty is 67% with the 15% VAT and 1% health development surcharge that I told earlier. Each and every year we are getting more than 40 million taka. 4 billion taka for health development surcharge. This is the money we can use for promotional activities for reduce the tobacco consumption, or some activities like the currently operating in our tobacco control groups through the fund by external source like the Bloomberg or other CTFK people. So if we use this money, it could be a good thing for us, but it is not visible this year. But we got only 20 crore or 200 million taka, like we are getting for do some programs and advocacy for reduce the tobacco consumption. Like I told you, the bidi, that is 2 types of bidi. One is filtered and another is non-filtered. The tax rate, VAT and health development surcharge is the similar, but their supplementary duties, one is 40 and another is 30. It goes to the only 56 and 46%. But dangerous thing is the smokeless tobacco product, which is the consumption, if you as per the GATS data, which is the very high in the women and the rural people, that tax rate is 61%. So government is not getting the tax from this smokeless tobacco. It is only less than the 10 billion, but it goes to the more than the 100 billion. If the government or the agency, National Board of the Revenue, they can strict for this monitoring and evaluating program. And there is a problem that no specific rules or model to increase the tobacco price or fix the tax. Each and every year, government determine to the price and tax with setting up the tobacco control groups and consider their own perspective, as well as the sum of the tobacco industry. They are sitting in the NBR people, National Board of the Revenue, for fixed the price and the tax. This year is also NBR announced that our the 11th June, our next financial year budget will be proposed. That time we think there are some change on the price. And then my last slide, maybe not. Sanja. Okay. The challenges that I told are the ban of e-cigarette and the nicotine pouch. As I earlier mentioned, that Philip Morris is coming in Bangladesh. Beside his Marlboro cigarette, they set up a factory for producing the nicotine pouch, and removal the term and above from the budget proposal. I told that the 10 pack of cigarette in the lower tier is 60 taka, and the medium tier 10 pack cigarette is 80 taka. So they put 60 and above, 80 and above. Why this is the problem? Because if you want, you can bring another brand which is 60 to 80, 70, 76, 78, 79, and then you can bring the medium tier to high tier to 80 to 220. You can put any of the brand in the price like the 85, 90 taka or 100 taka or 110 taka. So that is why this is a chance for the tobacco industry to bring the new product in the variety of price. Though we have the fourth tier of the cigarette, but if you go to the market, you will get the more than 17 type of price package available here. So another issue that I earlier said, the Bangladesh is the 10th to 11th. That is the data is varied. Our government is not giving us the real data. That is the problem. That is why the international agency is saying that Bangladesh stands like the highest tobacco leaf producing country in the 14th place. But as I conduct my own research, we are now in the 10th to 12th position for the high tobacco producing country. So before in 2019, there is a 25% tax for tobacco export, but the guys who was in the NBR chairman and who was also served in the BAT board, Mr. Musharraf Hossain Bhuiya, in 2019, they withdraw the 25% tobacco export duty. For this, last year, 50,000 acres land in a single year job for tobacco cultivation. Because before, if you have the 25% tax, if you export 100 taka, you have to give government as a 25 taka for tax. But nowadays, you don't have to give any sorts of penny. That is why the international market is very costly, and Bangladesh market is very cheap. Our tobacco leaves. That is why all the company is engaged to cultivate the product tobacco leaf. That is why I told you just a single year in 2024 to 2025, in a year, 50% increased the tobacco cultivation. And another issue that we ask the ban rolls and the tax stamp should be the digitalized, because there is no digital system. You cannot check is it fake or it is real. And we ask to NBR that if you put like the Nepal and the other countries in a barcode or a QR code, that could be a revenue generating and also the easy to monitor this is the tax paid product or not. Finally, the health should never be sacrificed for profit and the revenue. Next slide, please. And I will be happy if you have any question, though my English is not good for this. Some of the confusion may be arise. If you think so, you can ask me. I can give you the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sushanta, for these very insightful presentation and also the very detailed presentation on the roles of government officials and especially the stark contrast between the health costs and the externalization of costs from, and in contrast to the profits that the commercial sector is making from selling those harmful products, and also alluding to the disinformation that is placed by the commercial actors to disinform consumers, and also highlighting that the problem around new products, the e-cigarettes, the pouches, and that are especially targeting vulnerable populations like the youth, and that these products need to be regulated and banned, and also the issue about smuggling and the arguments that raising taxes will lead to smuggling and will not solve the problem. I think this is a very common argument that is used, but you've also made clear that this is a fake argument and it's not true. And also highlighting the role of tobacco control groups, journalists, civil society actors in improving transparency, holding government officials accountable, engaging them, mobilizing other actors, building alliances, and doing advocacy. So thank you very much for all those insights from Bangladesh, and all the work that you do in highlighting and providing those insights to other actors, and yes, pointing out that government officials should be held accountable, and to their political ambitions that are set out in the government. So are there any questions regarding clarifications to Sushanta? Looking at the chat, I can't see any questions, clarifications. If not now, if something comes up, we can pick them up in the discussion part. So I'd like to now introduce you to Mike Dunbier. Mike Dunbier is the Director of Strategy and Advocacy at Movendi International. He has an academic background in political science, philosophy, history of ideas, and global development from Dresden University, as well as Stockholm University in Sweden. Mike is leading Movendi International's work to empower governments, UN agencies, and civil society to develop and implement proven alcohol policy solutions to promote health and development for all. So thank you very much, Mike, for being here, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Nicole, for this very kind introduction. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. And thank you to Foodjustice and Unfairtobacco. This is a super cool webinar. Thank you for organizing it. I'm listening here, I'm learning, taking notes, trying to figure out how to chat and so on. So thank you for having me and for the opportunity to talk about alcohol policy in Sweden. I'm really struck by what we have heard from Mexico and Bangladesh. And I think there will be some similarities in the Swedish story, and then there will be also some differences, because Sweden right now has a world-class alcohol policy system that is anchored in a retail monopoly that I'll tell you about. But as you can see, this system is under attack. But let me tell you the story properly. By the mid-1800s, alcohol harm in Sweden was catastrophic. Alcohol harm was one of the drivers of extreme poverty in Sweden. Many people were leaving the country to find opportunity in the United States back then, for example, because of rampant poverty here. And you can, I don't know if it's even impossible to imagine this, but alcohol consumption reached up to 46 liters of pure alcohol per person per year in that period. Part of the problem was that workers were actually directly paid in alcohol. And you can imagine what that does to communities and to families, and where the wages went when it's only for alcohol. So it's really pervasive, massive harm. And so from the bottom up, from the grassroots, from the communities around the 1850s, there was a movement to deal with the harm. And so cities at the local level began implementing retail monopolies, and those had two founding principles. There was not supposed to be any private profit from alcohol. And Nicole, you just summarized that this is a problem with the Bangladesh story that Sushanta talked about. So they recognized that this is an issue in the 1850s in alcohol retail in Sweden, and surplus revenue was channeled to the public good. In the 1850s at the local level, they understood this, and we will get back to this. Here I put this together. This is a journey for Sweden. I talked about the 1850s. City in the middle of Sweden, Falun, introduced the first retail monopoly for alcohol sales. It spread around the country. In the west of Sweden, in the Gothenburg region, the Gothenburg system was introduced so that several cities developed these kind of model retail monopolies. And by 1900, alcohol revenue funded 36% of city council income where they implemented this. So you could see the positive effects in different aspects. In 1917, Sweden took a decision to introduce the individual rationing book, a system where people can only buy a set amount of alcohol every week. That reduced alcohol consumption and related harms and costs to society dramatically. Alcohol continued to be a massive obstacle to development in Sweden around this time, and the support for doing more and better in alcohol policy was so high that 49%, so not the majority, but 49% voted in 1922 in a referendum to ban alcohol completely in Sweden. This didn't come to pass, but in 1955, from all these experiences, from the local retail monopolies, all these regional monopolies were merged into a single national company. And in Swedish, we say Systembolaget. So this is a state-owned company that is tasked with selling alcohol without the profit maximization motive and with the public health priority motive. This retail monopoly now covers all alcohol that is being sold above 3.5% of alcoholic strength. And if we then move on, there's a much bigger story to be told here. But if we move to the current times, the current Swedish government, it's a center-right government that has the support from a extreme right-wing fascist party. This government is working on degrading this kind of world-class system that Sweden has developed over the last 100 years and that has benefited the country. And I'll show you this in a second as well, how it has benefited the country. But what they do, I have already highlighted this in this telling the story. They put people's health first instead of profit when they are selling alcohol here in Sweden. And I can tell you a little bit about what this looks like. In 2024, Systembolaget had a total sales of roughly 40 billion Swedish crowns and a profit of 330 million Swedish crowns. So the margin is approximately 1%. The profit is paid as a dividend to the state's budget. This dividend is not earmarked, so it doesn't go to health directly or to prevention or to treatment. It goes to the state budget. But the rules require that the markup to be low should be lowered if profitability persistently exceeds targets. So if the retail monopoly sells more alcohol, it's not supposed to make a bigger profit there, so that preventing any drift to what profit maximization is in the law that regulates what Sweden is doing in selling alcohol with this public health first approach. So the law regulates that all commercial incentives to sell more alcohol are actually removed. And for me, it's really remarkable because I am born and raised, I grew up in Germany, now I've been living for 20 years in Sweden. And to compare when I go back home and how it feels like to live here, what German supermarkets do or corner stores do to actually make people buy more alcohol all the time. You cannot go into a Systembolaget shop. You cannot get cold beer. You don't stand at the checkout with small bottles of ultra strength alcohol there. So all these things that make people just buy more alcohol, they are removed here. There are no incentives, and I put some, they don't have discounts. So it's a retail monopoly that actually also anchors the other alcohol policy best buys that we have heard from tobacco control as well. They are able to regulate the price. They are very good at regulating and ensuring that minors do not buy alcohol. In ordinary shops in Germany, minors get alcohol quite easily when this is tested. So all of these kinds of things are anchored in the system that we have here in Sweden with this retail monopoly. They are able to decide the outlet density because they control where they place the retail monopoly shops. And so there are not too many retail monopolies, for example, in poorer communities, which the alcohol industry likes to do in countries where this is not properly addressed. You find a high density of alcohol outlets in communities that cannot protect themselves against this. So what this then leads to is that alcohol consumption actually falls. So for Sweden, this system has really driven development. It has promoted public health, and it has helped actually generate economic return. And I'll show you just one picture later on. So part of the story is that when Sweden joined the European Union, it joined one cohesive internal market, as we say in EU language. But Sweden secured, and this was one of the major issues for Sweden to join the European Union at all, they secured an exception for having this retail monopoly. They had to give up 3 other monopolies, the distribution of alcohol, the import of alcohol, for example, but they were able to protect and maintain the retail monopoly. And the European Court of Justice confirmed the legal basis in 1997. So Sweden can have the retail monopoly. It's in agreement with other rules that EU member states need to apply and need to follow. In Sweden, the public really likes the retail monopoly. It is among the highest ranking public institutions when it comes to trust. Swedish society measures this. How high is the trust in the police, in the military, in the judicial system, and including here in Systembolaget, in the retail monopoly. And when science looks at the evidence, even the Swedish government, this current government, conducted an evaluation. I put there for you also the Swedish terminology for you, SOU 26.7. Even that in evaluation confirmed that the retail monopoly as the cornerstone of the whole alcohol policy system and alcohol taxation are effective tools for reducing and preventing alcohol harm and reducing the societal costs. The Swedish approach to alcohol policy is based on the recognition that alcohol harms everyone, not just the person who consumes it, but also the families, the communities, and society. And that's why I told you where Sweden is coming from with alcohol driving extreme poverty in the 1800s. But right now, the current government, and I hope you can see it on the picture, this is the Swedish parliament. There's a little Swedish flag on the right-hand side. Right now, this government is working really aggressively on degrading this very popular and very successful public health system. What they have done is they have introduced so-called farm sales. What it means that a country has a government-run, a state-owned retail monopoly is that there should not be other channels for selling alcohol, right? And now this government has allowed that production sites, so sites where alcohol is made, can also sell alcohol. And I struggled now with the terminology because the government is labeling it as farm sales, but it's really not farm sales, it's factory sales in urban settings. So this has been the public health criticism of this idea overall. And the first evidence that was published just a few weeks ago shows that it's people with already heavier alcohol consumption and younger people that go and buy alcohol from these factory outlets, so to say. So it's not that people drive to a nice countryside wine producing farm. It's here in the cities. I'm in Stockholm right now, for example. The government has also now decided to remove the food requirement in Sweden. Outlets can only serve alcohol when they offer food and when they sell food. So this is another public health measure. They have removed this. This will come into effect in 1 month in June. And in the previous months, last year, they have reduced the beer, the wine, and the liquor taxes. So they are degrading all the best buys, and they are really challenging this whole system that Sweden has. And here, this is from a German public health insurance company. I hope that's correct English. AOK sounds very cool, I think, in English if you say the name. They have conducted a public health index, and you can see where Germany ranks in alcohol policy, very, very low. And you can see where Sweden ranks with the current system that this current government is now degrading, very, very high. So you can see this here. I mentioned this for you already. 73% of the public in Sweden have very high trust for this system. And this is really, it's actually increasing, and it's really high at this level, proven every year. When WHO Europe looked at the evidence for the Swedish retail monopoly, for the Norwegian, Finnish, and Icelandic, there are other Nordic countries that have these retail monopolies. They also found that this works, this protects people from alcohol harm, and they actually recommended that other countries would learn from this. I would be very happy if Germany would want to introduce this and other countries. And if you look at the science, this system compared to a system that Germany has with alcohol selling points everywhere, like the commercial profit maximization approach to selling alcohol, Sweden prevents more than 1,000 people dying every year. So it's a remarkable success for keeping people alive, for promoting health, for keeping population level alcohol consumption low. It's much lower in Sweden than in Germany, for example. So if we summarize it, the alcohol retail monopoly works because it eliminates the fundamental conflict of interest that we have heard previously as well, to sell more alcohol for profit maximization. In Sweden, alcohol is being sold with a public health first approach. From 1850 to today, the core principle has been holding and is proven in scientific evaluations. Alcohol retail that is structured around public health benefits society. The costs, for example, that society in Sweden has are much lower than the cost that society has in Germany due to alcohol harm. And so we also showed that the model is legally viable. The EU Court of Justice upheld it. It's democratically supported, and it's internationally recognized. It's a science-based approach to dealing with alcohol retail and ensuring that we have lower alcohol harm. And so it's a template for any society that is asking how to put health before commercial interests. And with this, thank you very much once again, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Mike, for introducing us to the Swedish model of alcohol regulation. And yeah, you really pointed out the long history and how it is rooted in society and all the different steps, and that it seems to be very accepted and even yeah, like you said, it's coming from the communities, from the grassroots, and it's been a movement to control the harms caused by alcohol. And you also pointed out it's not only those who drink, but also their families, the society at large that pays the costs and the costs that are externalized. And what I also found very interesting, and I think it's not only in Sweden, but in many countries around the world, that with changing governments, regulations that have been set in place are trying to be changed, and deregulation gets more attention, and that's also very, yeah, disturbing and it's very important to go against those deregulations that are taking place. And you also pointed out how new governments and are changing the narrative, so they're very powerful in reframing the story. So it's also very important to go against that, and also make it transparent that it's not farm sales, it's factory sales, and it's causing big harm, especially among vulnerable populations. So thank you very much for those insights. And I don't see any questions for. There's one question, but I think we can pick this up in the discussion. In the interest of time, I'd like to suggest to move to the next presenter and introduce you to Philip Yakpour. Philip is a journalist and activist with over a decade of experience in public health policy. He is also the executive director of Rendezvous Development Initiative, a Nigerian NGO that works with indigenous communities, grassroots groups, and civil society to expose and challenge corporate impunity, unsound environmental practices, and human rights violations. So thank you very much, Philip, for being with us, and we're very much looking forward to your insights from Nigeria.
Yeah, so Nico, thank you very much. I have been enriched by the previous speakers. I think Mike said something. In different countries, we see similarities, we see commonalities, and of course, we also see some things that are not the same. So I've heard a lot about things that I believe are common to what is happening in Nigeria. I've worked on tobacco control, I've worked on trans fats, I've also worked and now work on alcohol also with Mike and others. So I don't know, can you see my presentation?
It's not in presentation mode yet.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Can you see this?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. So essentially, I'm talking about Nigeria's NCD crisis, but we focus on trans fats. But we need to have some backgrounders. Nigeria is a West African country, adjudged the most populous black nation on earth. We have a population of about 242 million people. Well, that is government statistics. We believe we are more than that. Different languages, about 525 different languages. So where I come from, mine is just one. So you have 524 others. Diverse landscape in the north and southern part of the country, tropical climate largely, and then of course fertile agricultural land. So agriculture used to be the mainstay of the Nigerian economy up to the 60s. We had cocoa, oil palm, groundnut pyramids. The farmers in that era grew, nutritious foods. That's what our parents, grandparents lived longer. You could have people who live as much as 140 years. My granddad was 140 when he died. But today the story is different. People are dying at the age of 30 and 40. So what happened? Essentially, in the late 50s, oil was discovered, and there was this shift. The focus of the government was now towards oil, and then the farms were abandoned. And of course, oil brought cheap money, and a lot of people in the farmlands moved into the cities, and they started living what they assumed was good life. Naturally reflect on, their lifestyle. A lot of Western lifestyle was adopted. People switched from those agricultural produce that they could readily get in their environment to um, that were, synonymous with the cities, where there's fast life, hustle and bustle, processed foods majorly. And that food started having some consequences. Like I mentioned, a lot of unhealthy diets, lack of physical exercise, tobacco use, alcohol consumption. These were synonymous with the cities where most people from the former farmland were moving into. So at the moment, Nigeria faces a serious, NCD crisis, like some of the things you've also mentioned: heart disease, diabetes, hypertension. Most Nigerians, young people have hypertension, and then of course we have these statistics that about 447,800 deaths happen annually from this and of course responsible for nearly 30%. LCD is responsible for nearly 30% of all annual deaths, including among young people. So according to the WHO, cardiovascular illnesses also account for a significant share of hospital admissions and deaths. One thing we must know is that treatment is very expensive. Most people pay out of pocket. So the implication goes beyond just corporations that are marketing debt, but the citizens end up carrying the biggest burdens. So there is a WHO supported national multi-sectoral action plan, which was supposed to end last year, aimed at reducing, these mortalities related to tobacco, um, alcohol, and diets. So we could also look at some of the uh, policies that government has put in place. The campaign against TFEs, ITFEs, actually started in 2021, 2022, but we do not have a tax regime. Rather, we, as a nation, there's this excise duty on sugar sweetened beverages. That is the only semblance of a tax on, you know, any NCD costing products. So our advocacy has been, since because there's no tax, our advocacy has been that there should be an increase in, the excise duty on SSBs to cover unhealthy diet product ITFEs. But then there are mandatory limits and bans on TFEs due to our advocacy. Like I said, 2021-22 was when civil society started doing a lot of work to ensure that ITFEs are reduced significantly, at least to comply with WHO recommendations. So on 28 September 2025, which was last year, the NAFDAC, that acronym is for the agency that does the regulation, National Agency for Food and Drugs Administration and Control, launched an implementation strategy and a roadmap for TFEs. And what it established essentially is a legal limit of no more than 2 grams of ITFEs per 100 grams of total fats in all oil and fats and food products, both local and imported. Then, of course, there's also now a ban on production and use of partially hydrogenated oil in food products, which, of course, we know is a major source of trans fats. And Nigeria is now at the stage where it is working towards a validation of its trans fat elimination program. We are not there yet. These regulations, like I said, may cover both domestic and imported food products. Our advocacy caught on very, very quickly because the advocacy work started in 2021-22, and by last year, we already had some quick wins in what I've listed on the screen. So these essentially are what has been achieved. So there's a Fats and Oils Regulation 2022, which limits trans fats to 2%, in 100 gram of fats and oil products. So not only has that regulation passed through, it has been gazetted. There's also the prepackaged food labeling regulations, which was also achieved. We worked on that. I remember when the regulator was about embarking on this journey, those documents were also shared with us to make suggestions. So the prepackaged food labeling regulations is also gazetted, and the roadmap, like I mentioned earlier, has been launched. But in all of this, the industry was not sleeping. So these are the important elements of the regulations I mentioned. So, so there's also the food product advertising regulations, which ensures that adverts must not contain false or misleading information. So we rely on this to advance our advocacy for on TFAs, including vague or unsubstantiated claims about health benefits of food products, and I'll mention why. Then there's also the prepackaged food, water, and ice labeling regulations, which requires that nutrient content, including trans fat, be explicitly stated. So it aligns closely with the advertising regulations. So these we have on ground. Now, these are the kind of images you get from Nigeria. So while the regulations have been accepted and gazetted, enforcement has not begun. So we still see this kind of, advertisement. So you have Burger King in Nigeria, you have the local variants in the country. So, and then you have Coca-Cola partnering with Burger King. So you can see that collabo of marketing debt. That's the latest now. You see them collaborating. You want to buy a burger, why don't you have a Coke? And things like that. So these are the kind of images you see here. This is a billboard where you had this sumptuous looking deck. And then, of course, this is Coca-Cola partnering with these companies. So in all of this, the industry has not gone to bed. So some of the arguments, and that's why I said there are similarities. Some of the arguments the industry has consistently advanced across the themes: tobacco, TFAs, alcohol now, is the framing that regulation will lead to job losses. And for us, we use the media to shut these arguments down, because the same industry that says there's going to be loss of jobs in the factories when regulation is in place are the same industries that tell you that their production processes are automated. So the question we always ask is, where will the job loss come from when you already have an automated process? You always think about automated processes, and then you're talking about job losses, and their argument always falls flat. Of course, the revenue loss argument, they always advance that also, that in the switch over, in the processes of recalibrating their machines, their factory machines, the government is going to lose. It's going to take time and all those kind of arguments. Then we've also seen the use of the media to syndicate outright lies. And some of their arguments is that, regulation, it pushes back to the issue of job loss, revenue loss to the government. And then they do everything to play down on the health impacts of their products. And then there's also the direct and subtle pressure on the regulator. The direct and subtle pressure on the regulator takes the form of the use of front groups. Sorry, maybe I need to, let me just 1 second. Okay. So, so there's also direct and subtle pressure on the regulator using a lot of front groups are created by the industry. You just hear suddenly that there's one group, you know, it's either they are workers or they are people who claim to, that they will lose their jobs when there's regulation. And they also use a non-industry body called the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, which is an umbrella body which has strong influence on the government. So they usually do this. And then for us, how do we counter them? We use industry monitoring activities. So we not only monitor what is happening in the markets, but we also, go out. We monitor them. We monitor what they are posting. We monitor what they are, even their internal documents, what they are saying. And then consistently, we organize training of journalists. And that is a key area for us, which has helped us navigate how the industry, advances. We train journalists on the issues so that by the time we are speaking, the journalists report from informed perspectives. We have a lot of articles supporting our arguments. And then we also support the regulator, in this case, the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration, and the Ministry of Health sometimes on advocacy engagement. And then we also have, a coalition. We continue to work together because fragmented, we cannot fight the industry. They have the resources, they have all it takes. But in unity, we can, pile pressure on them. So the next slide is actually the most important in any presentation I'm doing. And the next slide is to tell you guys, thank you. That's the most important.
Thank you very much, Philip, for your presentation on trans fats and what you've been doing in Nigeria. And I just want to pick up on a few points that you mentioned. I think because it's very important that the way you described the lifestyles some decades ago and how this has transitioned through all the influences, job opportunities moving from the rural area to the urban setting, and I think it's very interesting how you describe the development of quite recent policies and regulations that have been put in place. And congratulations on the advocacy efforts, which really have moved something. So, and I also wanted to point out again what you've mentioned around the industry tactics and the pushback that you currently experience, like the arguments that are raised in a lot of cases about threats to jobs and revenue losses and the important work that the media plays in this space to correct information, to monitor what's been going on, to play the watchdog and provide counter arguments, correct information, and also support regulators who sometimes also have a difficult job to push back against the industry tactics. So I think the media really plays a crucial role, and also what you've mentioned about the fragmentation. I mean, there are probably different grassroots efforts for different products, and it's important to build coalitions and to strengthen the force against the harmful products that are being put in place. So thank you very much, Philip. And since we're a bit running out of time, I want to move to the discussion and pick up one question that was raised in the chat about the example from Bangladesh, and if the shaming of political or government officials and political leaders has worked. Maybe Sushanta, a brief answer so that we can also take up some other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a huge challenge for Bangladesh because, as I said earlier, one ministry headed by one secretary. But if you go to the British American Tobacco Company board, there are 3/4 secretaries who are very powerful in a sense, like as I mentioned, the Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Agriculture, and Ministry of Finance. These are very related to the policy making to reduce the consumption. And NBR is last couple of years they didn't get any chance to enhance the tax, which is the very important for us because as per the FCTC, tax is the main tool to reduce the tobacco consumption. But last year, when the interim government was in the position, that time NBR enhanced the tax on lower tower cigarette at a 7% in a single year, and it helps to reduce the profit of the industry as well as the little bit reduce the consumption, and we will get definite a positive look in the near future. So it's a very difficult to why I mention again and again on the secretary who are sitting in the BAT board, because the officer in the Ministry of Industry or the Labor or the NBR official, when they think that my boss, not only 1, 2, 3, 4, they are sitting in the other side of the table. So how could I take the pressure to do a good job for or any strict policy for the tobacco control or public health? So they think we should do little bit little changes, but they don't act due to the high officials in sitting in the BAT board. So nowadays it little bit decreased due to our research and the news. There are some change, but still we have to go along.
Thank you very much, Sushanta. Want to pick up another question from the Q&A that's addressed to Philip. Does international solidarity from other civil society organizations play a role in pushing for regulations of unhealthy commodity industries? So maybe a more general question, does alliances also with other civil society actors from other countries and international and global movements, do they support a national advocacy and pushing for stronger regulations?
That is a very, very good question, which already answers itself. So we have worked, many times with, global coalitions. So I can tell you, for instance, today, we issued a press statement with a brief from Movendi. The issue is about the alcohol. So we have used that also as a subtle pressure on the government. We always remind them that, in Sweden, this is what is happening. In Ghana, this is what is happening. In Togo, this is what's happening. Why must Nigeria be different? So international solidarity and pressure have been part of the process that has helped us secure the kind of wins I've talked about. So it's the question answers itself, like I said.
Thank you very much, Philip. And a question to Mike about, do you know if the alcohol monopoly is also implemented in other countries? And would that also be a model for other unhealthy commodities in your perspective?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, the alcohol retail monopolies, they are implemented in the United States, in 17 federal states, in Canada, in several provinces, in some states of India. So it's around the world. I know that colleagues in the tobacco control movement, they have looked at this kind of system to take the next step in tobacco control. This has been discussed for other addictive substances, whether this could apply for countries that want to decriminalize cannabis, for example. So I think, in my experience, there are several communities that want to promote public health that look at whether this principle can be applied to remove the profit-making interest from selling harmful products when a society wants them to be sold, like in Sweden.
Thank you very much. I want to connect to that question. So, if you have products that are in itself harming, so there's no benefit, like how, and you also mentioned that there's a public health priority, but it's, you know, it's kind of ambivalent that it's done by the state, and the public health is the public health interest is put first, but at the same time, it's a harming commodity. So how is that ambivalence discussed and dealt with? Mike, to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great question. This is a very difficult question. It's really for a discussion, but I'll answer it very quickly. We know since 1988 that alcohol causes cancer, and I think alcohol belongs to the group 1 carcinogens. And I know it in Germany, we stopped using asbestos in our buildings when we understood that it's carcinogenic, and we put labels warning about tobacco and cancer on tobacco products. And alcohol is the substance, the product that we are not dealing with it like that. And this, I think, applies to other aspects of alcohol harm. So I think this ambivalence is really important to recognize that on the one hand, we know there is harm. I think many of us in our families, our communities, we even experience, we live with the harm. And on the other hand, we have different degrees of normalization and how it's being sold and marketed and so on. So sometimes I see, Nicole, in the social media that people say if alcohol would be discovered today, it would not be allowed. And this is the discussion that we have, I think, in all our unhealthy products. I think we cannot ban food, but we have to find ways that people eat healthy food and that unhealthy food doesn't actually outcompete where we have healthy staple food. We have countries that go for a tobacco end game. And in alcohol policy, I mentioned this, we have countries that attempted to ban alcohol. But I think if societies decide that they want to sell alcohol, the retail monopoly kind of way, and having even more monopolies for the import, for the production, for the distribution, that would be very powerful. Like now we have on-demand delivery where people die because they can get alcohol all the time now. So I think these monopolies, they're very powerful in a situation where societies decide that they want to have a substance like alcohol. And my last point would be, we are also making the case for us. It's not logic that European companies, you mentioned Carlsberg earlier, or your colleague mentioned Carlsberg earlier. Carlsberg should not decide that Cambodians have to consume beer. That should be up to Cambodians. So I think there is this international solidarity discussion where Western companies are pushing their products on people in low and middle income countries, and where it's not natural that a society says we want to have alcohol. So I think that's why I said it's a long discussion. Then what does it mean that a society wants? But Sweden wants, and you summarized it well, they had these local experiments and they made it a national policy. And I think then it's the best way of dealing with the ambivalence, but we still have massive harm. We still lose money. We still lose people. So this is a reality.
Thank you very much for pointing out that struggle, that maybe it's the best way forward in a system where a nation or a government decides these harmful products should be on the market. I mean, there's also always the debate on how much the government or officials should regulate products and interfere in personal decision making. But yeah, I think you pointed out the struggle very well. So thank you very much, Mike. And since we run out of time, I want to invite you for a concluding round, maybe by providing your best advice to go forward from your perspectives. It could be like from the media as a journalist perspective, but also for government advocacy or political advocacy. So a brief sentence from all of you. Philip, would you like to go first?
Yes. I think one thing that stands out that we must continue to deploy is actually that question that somebody put out there. We must continue to work together, build this international solidarity. Together, we are unbroken. Fragmented, we can be divided. That is my last line. Thank you.
Could also be the concluding remark for the webinar, but I want to give the chance also to Sushanta. What's your best advice from your perspective?
Thank you. And my last comment is we have to go to protect the public health. So we need to create more advocates inside of my colleagues, like the journalists. Some of us we are doing, but we need to capacity building, and the number of the journalists and advocates who will work for the. This is a relay race. When I will be aged people, then I can have a good team that they can carry forward. Not only the tobacco control, transfat is a big issue, and also the front part leveling is another big issue. And yesterday there are 2 cases filed against the bread company. They are producing the bread, which is the carcinogenic contamination is we found. So we have to do a lot, and that is why I urge that we need to collaboration, national and international organization partner as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushanta. Also about the capacity building and journalists and the role they play, especially, and we haven't even touched on artificial intelligence and disinformation and how that's being employed. So yeah, the journalists play a very important role in addressing disinformation and informing the public and providing facts and truth. So thank you very much, Sushanta. And Mike, what's your best advice?
Yeah, this is a cool question. I would frame the advice in terms of the title of this whole event. It's the money versus the many. So it's really important that we expose and counteract these health harmful industries and that we put people front and center, people with lived experience and people's support for these measures. I'm always struck by how little the politicians know that people support banning alcohol advertising, raising pro-health taxes, and so on. So for me, exposing the industry, the money, and putting the many front and center in what we do, that really seems to work.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you, the speakers, and also those who are not present anymore. Thank you very much for your valuable inputs and sharing your experiences and insights. And of course, also to the participants who are still with us, and also those who had to leave to other meetings already. And of course, to all the supporters in the background, the interpreters for their facilitation. It's very much appreciated. And if you're still here, it would be lovely if you could participate in a brief survey that will be shared with you to also take into account for future events on commercial determinants and tobacco in particular and other harmful products. So thank you very much for all of your inputs and being with us. Like I said in the beginning, the recording and the presentations will be shared with you. The recording will be available on YouTube. And please watch out for other events. Look at the websites of Foodjustice and Unfairtobacco. It's a rich source of information. And of course, the struggle is not ending, it's continuing. And I think what was mentioned a couple of times already, like building alliances and collaborations across product lines and across countries and within countries is very important. So yeah, please stay connected. And one last advertisement for something that comes up in the near future. The Center for Planetary Health Policy will also have a planetary health dialogue with a politician and a leading tobacco or advocate against tobacco, of course, at the end of June. So please have a look at the CPHC websites for further information. And with that, I wish you a lovely evening, a lovely day, morning, evening, afternoon, and looking forward to continuing discussion in other spaces. Thank you very much.